So here we go with the araceae, which is the philodendron or arum plant family. Also, occasionally you see aroid when they refer to these plants, A-R-O-I-D. They are very distinctive in their flower structures. You can see the pictures down below. Here we have a photograph and a diagram of a spadix. The tubular structure in the middle there is the actual spadix, and then the modified leaf that surrounds it is called a spathe that subtends the spadix, which basically means it's fastened at the bottom. Sometimes the spathe actually is united around the front so that you can hardly see the spadix, and then also sometimes there are liquids and interesting gooey stuff produced down in the side of the spathe that helps attract pollinators and possibly other reasons that we don't even understand for these plants. The peace lily is what is photographed below, a plant that's extremely common in the floral industry, both house plants and bouquets, things, a very important species. And its Latin name is Spathiphyllum wallisii. Spathy, obviously coming from the fact that it's got that big obvious spathe there, and phyllum is Latin or Greek for leaf. So it's spathe-leafed, and Wallisii, I believe, is some botanist whose last name was Wallace, got himself memorialized by being named, having this plant named after him. Additional characteristics of this plant family: it is in the monocot group, so we look for flower parts and plant parts in threes, and parallel leaf veins, along with quite a few other characteristics, fibrous root system, and so on. It is insect pollinated, which means flies, bees, beetles, and also means that the flower is going to be set up one way or another to attract flies, bees, and beetles to aid in pollination. It's mostly tropical. Some of them are occasionally used in landscaping even, but only in, maybe not where they originated from, but in areas where they are not going to experience cold winter because they're not particularly cold hardy. The sap in them contains calcium oxalate. I'll talk about a little bit more later. That is can cause irritation if somebody bites into one or gets the sap on your skin. Interestingly, some of the species are thermogenic, which means they actually can produce heat. So, if you thought plants were cold-blooded, I'm here to tell you, not always. They can get as warm as 45 degrees centigrade, which is 113, 115 degrees Fahrenheit, so pretty darn warm. And this aids in attracting insects because inside of that structure, the spadix and spathe, often there is they produce different compounds that have odors that are attractive to these pollinators, or possibly food product for them. And as they warm up, those compounds volatilize, so they sort of throw their net wider by warming up their attractive odors and letting them waft away. And then in addition, it's probable that it also helps prevent some tissue damage, because these plants bloom so early in the spring that they sometimes are blooming in the snow. I'll show you a picture of that also. Interesting too, they also produce some of the world's largest flowers. The Titan arum is really something to behold. So I'll show you a picture of that. Taxonomy, a little bit more. Again, remember the araceae, and the end of any plant taxon means a family. ACEAE indicates a plant family, which is a group of related genera. When you're actually given the official Latin name of a plant, you've got the genus and the species, and then those genera are related into a family. So this one is the araceae. It's in the order Alismatales, which is a higher grouping. Orders in the plant world always end in ALES, so that is going to be a group of plant families, and so Araceae is just one in the Alismatales. Has, depending on which taxonomy reference you're looking at, there's at least 107 genera, probably more, and getting close to 4,000 species. Looking at our evolutionary tree here, on the plants at the lower bit are more primitive. You've actually got water plants and algae, things that very primordial, and then as you go up, things are more evolved. And the monocots are kind of the branch to the left there. And you can see where I've circled the order that this group is in. So it gives you a sense of where they are evolutionarily, development-wise. Some notable species. A lot of these are houseplants as far as their economic value or economic status on the earth. In the nursery and florist industries, hundreds of thousands of these plants are grown every year. Additionally, there's taro, is a food plant that enormous numbers of people use as a starch source. So we got philodendron, Dieffenbachias, which often, even as odd as the name is, are called Dieffenbachia in the horticulture industry, or dumb cane. Aglaonema is a Chinese evergreen. Caladium and elephant ears are very commonly used in outdoor pots and in indoor displays. Anthurium and taro that I already mentioned. So here's Dieffenbachia on the left. You can see the spadix and spathe in that picture. Often these plants have a lot more variegation on their leaves, so they're quite familiar. I think most people would recognize them from if you've ever gone and bought house plants. On the right is a collection of caladium species. These have been selected by horticulturalists for just this incredible range of color variation. You can get them practically all white or just white and green or solid pinks, an enormous selection available for color in pottings and plantings. Here are a couple philodendrons. The one in the upper left is a very common Hartley philodendron, little viney thing that is used in house plants. The one on the lower right is also a philodendron. It's just a really big one that's large enough to actually be a landscape plant in a warm climate. San Diego, Texas, those kinds of places you can find these things. There's another philodendron called monstera that puts up these great big huge leaves. It's kind of dinner plate size and has big slits in it. That's also a very common species. Anthurium on the left there is used in the floral industry, and then Aglaonema on the right, that's your Chinese evergreen. And those, as you come into the building 1 on DMAC campus in the main, what I think of as the main entrance off the parking lot, sort of across from where you go in for aid and everything else. There's 2 enormous potted plants right in your left as you come in the doors. Very nice looking ones too. Now, the Titan arum, Amorphophallus titanum, is a big flower. There's no doubt about that. There's some argument whether it's the biggest flower in the plant world, kind of depending on how you define flower. There are some flowering structures that contain a lot of different individual flowers, but it's still one structure, and the hair splitting goes on, but I don't think we need to argue that this is a big flower. It can reach about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, so not as hot as some, but it does warm up a little. And somewhat unfortunately is that it smells like rotten flesh. A lot of things that are pollinated by flies stink when they bloom because that's how they're attracting flies to them. So this thing has been called the rotten horse plant. I've never smelled a rotten horse, and most people haven't, but there's a lot of pictures on the internet of people holding their noses while they admire this thing. They only last 3 days. All that effort to put that up something that big, and it's over with in a short amount of time. And the leaves are very funny too. If you look at the guy there in the turquoise shirt on the stem going through the right-hand side as we look at it of his shirt, is the leaf that's associated with this flower. So they put up one great big old leaf, and it grows for many years, and then eventually it decides, okay, it's time to put this flower up. And a lot of these are because they're so novel, they're around the world in different greenhouses. And I read that one that was at Kew Gardens in London, a very famous botanical gardens. They went to transplant the corm, which is a specialized underground storage structure, and it weighed 200 pounds. So these are beefy plants, very unique. And oddly enough, the same family has some of the very smallest plants. Lemna is also called duckweed or pondweed. If you look at the picture of the person's fingers, every little set of 2 leaves is a plant. And very, very tiny. They do actually bloom and put up a little spathe, but it's very rare. They tend to reproduce vegetatively more often. They can really be a problem in ponds that have excess fertility, whether they're getting fertilizer runoff or animal runoff, so that there's a lot of nutrients in the water, especially phosphorus. You get algal blooms, plant blooms like on the left, where the plant, the surface of the pond is just completely covered with these plants. They're nutritious. There are places where these plants are actually harvested as a food source, using big rakes, skimming them off the top of the lake. They are duckweed. They're good food for ducks and fish and a lot of things. But when you get it to that extent, they start being less than ideal. There are some species in Iowa: jack-in-the-pulpit, skunk cabbage, sweet flag, green dragon, araceae are native araceae species in Iowa. Here is skunk cabbage, Symplocarpus, and you can see the little holes in the snow with little tips sticking out. Those are the skunk cabbage fruiting bodies, the spathes that have actually burned their way through the snow. And then you can see them completely exposed on the lower right. And you notice the species name there is fetidus or fotidus, and that's from the word fetid, which means stink. And sure enough, these are pollinated by flies, so they're stinky. They are not cabbage in any way, and of course they're not skunks. Green dragon, not a dragon, it is green on the left, and jack-in-the-pulpit on the right. There isn't a fruiting body there isn't a flower on the green dragon, but the leaf structure is so interesting that I thought that was more interesting to show you anyway. And on the right, the jack-in-the-pulpit's very famous. Sometimes the little jack down in there is white, sometimes it's maroon like those. The spathe is a tube around the spadix, and then forming a little cap over the top. The trilobed leaf up above the two spadix on the right is the leaf that's actually for this plant. And then the little red bit down in the middle, both of these species, when they fruit, look like that. It looks like somebody stuck some kind of strange popsicle in the ground, because by the time they form those red fruits, the leaves have long since died and gone away for the summer. So very strange to see these objects in the forest, and it can be quite a struggle to figure out what they're related to, because there's no leaves to help you along your way. So taro is a very important economic food plant worldwide. There are many people throughout the world use this as a starch source. If you look on the Wikipedia page, there's literally dozens of different cultures listed and the ways that they use this plant as a food. It's primarily tropical, because these are tropical species. You can consider it a staple in some countries. It's probably the first plant that was ever cultivated. Cultivation means actually intentionally planting it, encouraging it to grow, and then harvesting it. And as early as 5,000 years ago, there's evidence that as early as 5,000, as far back as 5,000 years ago, in India, Malaysia, some of those areas, that people were eating this plant and cultivating it intentionally. The root is generally what's eaten. It's a corm. Sometimes the leaves are. Obviously, you get a lot of foliage. One little problem is there are these things called raphides in the sap, which are calcium oxalate crystals that can cause a lot of issues if they're not managed properly. But people from these areas know how to cook them right or soak them overnight and get rid of that. It's been called the tropical potato, or potato of the tropics. And but it's also, this very same species is actually grown ornamentally as elephant ears in warmer areas. So there you can see a gentleman that's working in his taro plantation, this big old plants. And on the upper right is somebody holding the corm from a harvested taro plant. And so you can see it's going to be a considerable amount of tissue there. And then the lower right, the corm has been sliced and breaded in like a tempura and then deep fried. The toxicity, again, occurs from chewing on the stems of the leaves that haven't been processed. It's the calcium oxalate, and it can cause this localized swelling and pain. Not life-threatening, but over time, if repeatedly eating these plants that haven't been properly processed, it can lead to kidney stones. So some concern. So for additional links, if you're interested in more information, of course there's a Wikipedia, but you can look up the International Aroid Society, which has an extensive website dedicated to these plants, and even a journal called the Aroidiana. And also there's a website called Araceae that has art and taxonomy, just a real sort of hodgepodge of interesting information about the family Araceae.